Sit right down and I'll show you where my dreams began.
I'm Michael Dugan, your culinary host, guiding you through the chef's journey. Join me at the chef's table, where you'll experience stories, secret sauces, signature dishes, and kitchen disasters.
Come on in, to a place you've never been. Sit right down and I'll show you where my dreams began.
I'm Michael Dugan, your culinary host, guiding you through the chef's journey. Join me at the chef's table, where you'll experience stories, secret sauces, signature dishes, and kitchen disasters. Today on the show, I want to introduce you to Chef Abbey Miller. Abbey was the first recipient of the Anthony Bourdain Scholarship through the Culinary Institute of America. And she's also received a minor in Asian cuisine. When she graduated, she found that she had a love of writing, photography, and travel. Abbey, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Such an honor to finally connect with you and have a real world conversation.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Especially, through the past 2 years now of COVID, which is insane. It's just amazing to be able to connect with people who are across the country from you. I think it's incredible.
Social media has now allowed us to connect not just across the country, but across the world. I mean, the people that you and I have met through social media, it blows my mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's get into it. So why don't you tell me a little bit about what it was like growing up? I understand that you're really strongly connected to food. And can you tell us why?
Growing up, I have moved more than about 40 times in my life. And so I've lived in many parts of Florida. I've lived in many parts of New York, and I never really found, that sense of home or stability in a home sense. So I searched for it through food. And, I would bake. I would, watch my mom in the kitchen. I would be obsessed with food culinary shows and, Food Network. And I think the most common show that I can remember watching growing up was Man vs. Food. And oh my gosh, for some reason, I aspired to, be like him and have a show like that. And it wasn't until I was in 6th grade, so I was about 12 years old, that my mom and dad opened a restaurant in Buffalo, New York. And they had absolutely no restaurant experience prior to this. This is just kind of...
They had never worked in a restaurant before.
My mom, she did, front of house management experience here and there, but so like
a little bit,
a little taste of, hospitality, but, to build a restaurant from the bottom up, it was definitely a new venture for all of us, actually. And I remember, watching them build the kitchen from, the scratch all the way to the shiny stoves and the sparkling utensils, just everything. And I was so amazed by it. And, my 12-year-old self then didn't really understand the kitchen. I was just watching these, at the time, huge men, carry all this stuff and create all these incredible dishes. And, watching that restaurant go from literally nothing, like an empty lot, to having it jam-packed with people and it being on the news and it being in the newspaper, it was incredible. And so from that moment on was definitely what sparked my interest in, the hospitality industry and just seeing the faces of those guests there, I was just, I knew it was what I wanted to do. And it was definitely, I think it was the first moment in my life as a 12-year-old girl where I was like, this feels like home. Like this feels like comfort to me, because that was something, I struggled trying to find as I was growing up. People would think, okay, that's when she started chasing her dream, was at 12 years old. I didn't really think about working in a kitchen until my senior year of high school. So I kind of put that, dream and that love aside and hid it within me for a while, because I grew up with 5 sisters. So they all were in law school and going to be a teacher. So I never wanted to be, the youngest sister that was like, oh, I want to go cook, because I was scared of that judgment. It wasn't until my senior year of high school, I got a job at this dessert place, and my whole family decided to come visit me one night, and it was a crazy busy night, and it was an open kitchen. So they were able to, sit down in the restaurant, and they were able to watch me cook and take all the tickets. And it was in that moment, seeing them watching me, and I can remember it so vividly, like to this day. I knew that, the line life and, the cooking life is like what I want to do. And, the passion of serving people, I found so much joy and happiness in it, honestly. And, my mom told me that night, like, wow, Abby, like you were so comfortable up there and you killed it. And I was like, I didn't believe her at the time.
Yeah.
End of senior year, I graduate high school. And by that time I was, enrolled at Mercyhurst University for intelligence studies. And, that's what I said I was going to go do and what I was going to go study. I had my roommate picked out. I visited the campus, met the president. And it was, one morning I woke up, I sat on my stairs and I cried, and I looked at my mom and I was like, I don't want to go there. I was like, I want to go, here. And that was the Culinary Institute of America.
Oh my
and
gosh.
that came to
That's
a shock
amazing, Abby.
Yeah, it came to a shock to my whole family, because, they're like, you're giving up, you're giving up one type of CIA for another type of CIA, the cooking world. And I was just like, this is what I want to do. And the first time, I stepped on campus was move-in day. And honestly, since then, that was truthfully like the start of indulging in that, that spark of loving food so much that, sparked in me at 12 years old.
Wow.
So it was a long journey to get there, but I'm super thankful for it.
Yeah. And so you said intelligence studies? Are you talking CIA intelligence?
Yeah. So
really?
Yes.
How did that happen? Oh my gosh. Let's not talk about cooking. No, I'm kidding. I want to talk about cooking.
Alongside watching Food Network shows, I was obsessed with, Bones and Criminal Minds. And I would watch that all the time growing up. So I was super interested in, studying the law. And I was like, like police officer or, forensic studies. And so that's what I was going for. And I just kind of put my foot down and was like, this isn't for me. And I did a total 180.
That's like a 360.
Yeah, definitely more like a 360.
Right. Wow. Oh my gosh. So then you started in the CIA? Is in the Culinary Institute of America?
Yeah. So I started August of 2017. My mom moved me in. It was just her and I. And I remember she was so nervous. I was nervous too. And she never told me this until about a year later. But she told me that when she moved me in, she thought that there was no way I was going to last longer than like a month at this school. If you tour the campus, it is, it's very strict and very formal.
Take us through that. I would love to know. One of my dreams is to tour the campus and fly across the U.S. and go to the CIA and not attend it, but see it.
Yeah, move-in day was incredible. And having not visited the campus before then, they definitely did everything in their power to, make every single student sort of feel welcome and just happy to be there. Like from the point of waiting in our car to move into our dorm, they were already passing out cookies and milk and, running down the sidewalk and like saying welcome. And we had to do a whole toking ceremony. And at this toking ceremony, the parents were there and the families were there and the students, had to be in their chef whites, and they had to learn, CIA's, the mise en place song. They had to go through the whole acceptance. And it wasn't until they walked across the stage and the president of CIA put the toque among our heads. And that was sort of, welcoming us in the official, you're officially part of CIA.
Explain what a toque is.
A toque is a chef hat, basically, a very long white hat, the hat you see on Ratatouille.
I can visualize that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That white hat it's called a toque. And so we would walk across the stage and they would place the toque among our head. And that was, that was like welcoming us in. And before that, they had talked to the parents, and the students were sort of behind stage, I believe. And they had given this whole speech to the parents of, how tough the CIA is. And, they call it the West Point of culinary school. And my mom, my mom sitting in the audience, and I guess she was just, thinking to her head, like, oh my gosh, like, what is Abby getting herself into?
Yeah, sure.
She didn't think, I was cut out for that, stress and the yelling
it's
and,
tough.
And, sure enough, a month down the way, she had many calls, and, I was crying, I was stressed. I was like, I don't know what to do. But I turned it around, and, the shy girl who didn't really think she would, make her mark ended up being, the class speaker for her class 3 years later.
Amazing.
So
I love that.
I definitely, I would repeat it in a heartbeat if I could. Like, I would repeat it 1,000 times over. It was the absolute best experience of my life. The most stressful and one of the most hardest, but the most rewarding, that's for sure.
So for those who haven't been to cooking school, what's the structure like, the curriculum? Because, I can describe the cooking. I went to cooking school at South Seattle Community College in Seattle, and it was one of the top 3 in the country for community colleges, and really structured. We had all these different departments, and every 2 weeks you would rotate your station. So you'd start out in prep, and then you'd end up in, saute or sauce, or you'd end up being a waiter, and it would just rotate completely around the cooking school. So every 2 weeks you would get a brand new experience. They even had a potluck every day. All the food that was left over was put into a potluck, and there was a sous chef, quote unquote, that was your role for 2 weeks, was to be the sous chef. And you created the meal for everyone, right? Based on the ingredients that you had. So it was an amazing learning experience. But
that's awesome.
My guess is it might have been similar to CIA, but I don't know.
So it actually, that is fairly similar to CIA's, how their classes work. When now it's a little different. I understand, as the years go on, they're kind of changing how the curriculum works. But when I started, I had a 15-week fundamental class, and, basically what I meant before of, how they're changing the curriculum, they're not necessarily changing, they're just adjusting the rotation. So, people who start now might not take that fundamental class first. They just might take it later down the road. But so when I started, I had that fundamental class first, and it was 15 weeks, and you learned all the kitchen fundamentals from, Brunoise, Julienne, Bâtonnet, all the fine dice cuts, all the mother sauces. You learn every basic that you possibly could know relating to, food. And I had an AM class, so I would wake up every morning at 4:30 a.m. And so
wow.
I loved it personally. I'm that weird person that, for some reason likes the morning more so rather than staying up late at night. So I would wake up at 4:30, and as a team leader, I had to be the first person there. So I would get there around like 5:15-ish. And I would have my class come in, and certain people would be designated to, set up the stations, go get their food from the storeroom, bring it back to the kitchen. And, you would just cook what was scheduled that day by your chef, whoever your chef is for that class. And so that's how those 15 weeks would go. And then, after that, you would take a meats class for 3 weeks, a fish class for 3 weeks. You would go work in high volume production, which we called the egg, because that is what our like lunch cafeteria place is. And so you would go work there. And then every student would take a break for 4 months, but not necessarily a break. They would go work out in the real industry. So they would get an amazing experience. They would get what is called an externship.
That is what needs to be done, because we didn't have that when I went to school. So you graduated and you're like, what do I do? Right?
Exactly. It opens
That's a really great idea.
A lot of, connections too. And so for those 4 months, we'll go out, we get graded by the restaurant, the hotel, whoever you chose to go work with. You do a lot of, they'll probably ask you to do a tasting for them in the beginning and at the end to see, how you grew at that place. And what's funny is after the externship, this isn't to scare anyone, but this is kind of why I like that they do the externship, because it allows people to truly get a sense and a feel for, is this really my passion? So after externship, not everyone genuinely, will come back right away. A lot of people sometimes will say like, okay, like I'm going to, just stay here and work, or they'll be like, the food industry isn't necessarily for me. So I love the fact that the externship is there, because I think it's a valuable learning experience. Before you actually get thrown out into the real world, where genuinely you are on your own. But, it allows you to grow in a lot more ways than just one. So I ended up going to Stein Eriksen Lodge in Park City, Utah for 4 months. And I went during their busiest season, which was Christmas and, the Sundance Film Festival. And that was an amazing experience. And
what did you like and what did you love? And what didn't you like?
Oh God. Arriving there, I was definitely homesick for sure. Yeah. I was far away from Buffalo. It was Christmas time and I wasn't sure how, to handle it at first. And growing up with the type of, childhood I did, I still, struggle with, learning how to get through certain anxiety. So I was definitely out of my comfort zone when I first arrived. And, I remember talking to one chef, Chef Lupe, and he had pulled me into the office. And this was after I had, called my mom that morning, crying, saying like, I don't know if I can do this. And he pulled me into the office, and I didn't tell anyone what was going on, but he knew, and he asked if I was okay. And I told him, I'm just, struggling. And he assured me, that like we're family and that he's here for me and that I can do this. And, from that point on, I showed up early every day. I went in on my days off to learn extra things. Like it really motivated me, because from that point on, I just kept telling myself, if I have this person believing in me and, this person believing in me, it was super empowering, because it allowed me to, keep pushing myself. And, I kept telling myself like, okay, I can do it. And I didn't want to give up. So it was definitely tough. It was my first experience in a fine dining establishment. I was one of the only females in the kitchen at the time.
Yeah,
so that was very intimidating for sure. As a female in the kitchen, you gotta deal with those crappy remarks that are, thrown here and there. So,
that's not right.
As a 18-year-old, I was definitely trying to learn my way through that and, allow myself to grow from it. But definitely at the end, I had, the chefs being like, oh, please, like, why can't you stay? So I definitely proved myself, and I'm really thankful for, the amount of times I got yelled at and the amount of times they pushed me. And
getting yelled at, though, that's part of the restaurant business. People that have never experienced it, they don't understand, the smashing of a plate, the cussing, the cursing, the screaming. I had a waitress throw a bowl of hot soup at me once, and she was just angry in general. She wasn't angry at me. And it was like, that stopped me in my tracks, but it's commonplace. It shouldn't be. It really shouldn't be. But the pressure can be really, really intense, and people blow off steam in very strange ways, and they shouldn't, but that's the reality of it.
Yes. And that kind of brings up an important topic I want to get to a little later. In regards to, it doesn't have to be the way that it is in the kitchen and in the industry. And that's something that I'm definitely trying to work on and bring awareness to, is that, I think you can still serve, bomb ass food while having a nice kitchen culture. And you don't have to, degrade your cooks and chefs if they make a mistake, or it doesn't have to be as brutal as it is. And that's definitely what I'm
let's talk about it, because this is the perfect time to bring it up and share with our audience and talk about it, because I agree with you.
Yeah. So it's something I'm very open and vulnerable with, is mental health. I am super honest about that. I've since about 8th grade, I've struggled with, anxiety, depression, and PTSD. And it's something I've become super humble about, and, accepting that if other people have that, like, it's okay. And knowing that it's nothing to be ashamed about. And so, dealing with mental health while being in a very brutal industry, it definitely hurts you for sure, especially if you're at an establishment that doesn't necessarily support mental health, or, support the fact that as a cook, you still have a life outside the kitchen. And that's, at 22 years old, I felt myself experiencing burnout symptoms. I was having major panic attacks before going into work. I suffering from like severe imposter syndrome, meaning, I felt like I wasn't, good enough in the kitchen, and I was really, hard on myself. And I was like, I'm 22 years old. I just graduated, I shouldn't be burnt out, and I'm not blaming the kitchen industry itself. It definitely has to do with,
I would blame it. I really would.
I mean, I understood, like, I definitely have, like, struggled, with mental health beforehand, but the industry, it brings that opening eye to it if they don't support it. I've been at places that told me I couldn't work the line because I was too intimidating to the men and too distracting as a female to the men on the line. So it's just moments like that where you have to put your foot down and be like, okay, I have to understand my worth and I have to move on. And that's something it's super hard. And I think I'm watching a lot of friends and, fellow workers that I've graduated with, leave the industry because they just think that this is how it's supposed to be and they can't handle it. And I don't want to see that. I watch these people kick ass through school and I know how good they are. And I know what they're all capable of. It's just a matter of, the industry that we're walking into is the industry of such old and modern ways that they don't want to change with the times. And so
they change slow, really slow.
And whereas us, we're so, what do they want to call us? Boomer or not boomers, Gen Z.
Right.
They definitely, there's a lot of opinions about us, but we're just trying to move with the times and make mental health something to not be ashamed of and, trying to make workplaces worth working. And that's something Chef Jensen taught me and brought awareness to my eyes that, I did not really understand what that meant until I sat down and was like, I'm not at a workplace right now that is supporting my mental health. And it was at that point where I realized, how important it really is to, establish a workplace that has, that positive energy and accepting that we all have a life outside of work and we all have those struggles. And, we shouldn't be scared to go up to our bosses and, say that we're feeling underappreciated or undervalued or, hey, I'm having a bad day. Can I go take a second? Just little things like that we shouldn't be scared of. And I think that's what a lot of things that need to change. And, I want to see the people that I graduated with continue in the industry because I know they love it for what it is. And I know that there's so many positive changes they all want to do to it. It's just a matter of are we able to, get our foot in the door, or is it going to constantly be like the old ways? And so, it's rough, but we just got to keep pushing and speaking up about it.
A lot of it, I think, as a career coach, and I still am, I do it on the side, but I think it's important to ask the right questions. In other words, when you go to interview with someone, you think about it you're not going to accept the position unless it's right for you. And a lot of people don't do that. They accept it because they're offered it. But the more times you pound the pavement and the more opportunities that you look at, the more choices you have. So a lot of people, first job they're offered, they take it, and then they deal with whatever happens, and then they leave. But if you step back and you think about what do you want, and you make a list, and one of the strategies is you look at previous work that you've done, and you evaluate those jobs, and you say, here's what I loved about this job, and you make a list of all those things. Here's what I hated about this job. You're angry, you're frustrated, or you just didn't like it, right? And then you realize that there are certain patterns that different restaurants, different hotels, different places in hospitality have. It's a culture. I work for a company now that really values their employees, really values. During the pandemic, they gave us 2 extra days off just to have a mental health day. It was a total surprise to the whole company. And, another thing I really value is volunteering. I actually get paid time off to volunteer because of my company, because they see working at a nonprofit and volunteering and giving your time as value. Now, of course, the company gets a huge benefit by doing that, but they built that into their culture. So when you look for those kind of organizations, even in the hospitality industry, they exist. That's the key, I think, is making that right choice, connecting to the right chef that has those values, like Chef Jensen, and Chef Mimi. And to me, that's the key. And I didn't do that in my early days in the restaurant business. I just went along and I said, okay, here's this opportunity. I'll take it. And then I left. 6 months, I left. Stayed, a year in another place, but I left because I wasn't fulfilled, right? And so what you're talking about, I think, is culture. And even though we can paint a picture and say the whole restaurant business is, a disaster, it's not. It depends on the culture of the organization, I believe.
Absolutely.
In part 2, Chef Abbey takes us deep into the kitchen and shares intimate memories of mental health issues in an essay entitled The Kitchen, A Hell Away from Hell. She also shares another essay with us about her travels to Singapore and connection to food. And finally, her favorite recipes and some kitchen disasters. Thanks for joining us today. Follow us on Facebook. Find our website in the show notes. Subscribe on Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you listen. Leave a comment with 5 stars and stay tuned for the next episode of Voice for Chefs.